The hydraulic press came down before I could reach the Mustang. Glass exploded, steel folded, and the roof of my father's restored 1969 Boss Ford 29 vanished beneath the press. My name is Ethan Cole, and that car wasn't abandoned. It was legally mine, fully registered, insured, and professionally appraised at $250,000. Marianne Voss, our HOA president, stood beside the operator and calmly insisted that the destruction had been legally authorized. I had the original title in my hand. She had a newly issued state title showing the HOA as the car's legal owner. But the destruction of my father's Mustang hadn't started at the salvage yard. It had started 3 weeks earlier, when I still trusted Marianne and found a harmless-looking notice on my garage door. I didn't know that notice was the first step in having my car falsely declared abandoned and transferring its ownership without my knowledge. 3 weeks earlier, my only goal was to get the Mustang back inside before Monday. I had replaced one of the garage door rollers, and the new track needed one final alignment before I trusted it above a car worth more than my house had cost when I bought it. So the Mustang spent the weekend in my driveway beneath a fitted blue cover, registered, insured, fully operational, and parked entirely on my property. Sunday afternoon, I found a white HOA envelope taped to the garage door. Marianne Voss had signed it herself. It cited Stonegate Ridge's restriction against the prolonged outdoor storage of non-operational vehicles and gave me 48 hours to correct the violation. I photographed the notice before removing it, then opened my insurance file at the kitchen table. The title was clean. The Texas registration and insurance were current. I emailed copies to Marianne and explained that the Boss 429 ran perfectly and would be back inside as soon as I finished aligning the garage door. 20 minutes later, she replied, "Thanks, Ethan. That should resolve it." Her response reassured me because Marianne and I had never been enemies. 2 years earlier, when a contractor redirected storm runoff toward my side yard, she had spent 3 HOA meetings helping me force the builder to correct it. She could be rigid, but I had always considered her competent and trustworthy. So I saved her email and returned to the garage. Tuesday morning, after finishing the repair, I backed out the Mustang and let the engine idle. To document that the car was fully operational, my daughter Maya filmed me driving it around the block. When we returned, she pointed toward the windshield. "Dad, what is that?" An orange adhesive notice had been pressed against the passenger side glass. It looked nothing like Stonegate Ridge paperwork. Across the top, in heavy black letters, were the words, "Abandoned vehicle, pending removal." The notice listed my address, the Mustang's year and color, and the final 6 digits of its vehicle identification number. I photographed it before touching anything, then called Marianne. "I closed your violation," she said. "That sticker didn't come from me." I asked whether Stonegate Ridge had contacted code enforcement, the police, a towing company, or any outside compliance contractor. She hesitated. Not that I authorized. That answer bothered me more than a simple no would have. I contacted city code enforcement and the police unit responsible for abandoned vehicle complaints. Neither agency had opened a case involving my address, and neither had issued the sticker. Less than an hour later, I walked outside to photograph the notice again. The windshield was clean. Someone had removed the orange sticker while I was inside my own house. I checked the camera system before I touched anything else. The driveway camera should have covered the Mustang, but the playback jumped from 10:14 to 10:32 that morning. 18 minutes were missing. At first I blamed whoever had taken the sticker. Then I opened the router diagnostics and found something more embarrassing. The wireless access point feeding that camera had been dropping connections for days. I had noticed the warning light twice and kept telling myself I would replace it after finishing the garage door. Nobody had defeated my security system. I had ignored a failing piece of equipment, and now the one gap that mattered belonged to me. Maya watched me install a replacement access point that evening. "You still think this is paperwork?" she asked. "I think somebody wants me to react before I know what happened," I said. So I did the opposite. I moved the Mustang into the garage, photographed the odometer and vehicle identification number, and saved copies of the title, registration, insurance policy, Marianne's email, and my photographs of the orange notice in 3 separate places. For 4 days, nothing happened. Then I received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a photocopied vehicle removal warning stating that the Mustang had been observed as non-operational and could be subject to towing. No agency seal. No signature. No phone number. Just my address and the same last 6 digits of the vehicle identification number. I called Marianne again. This time she sounded irritated rather than helpful. Ethan, I already told you the HOA matter is closed. Then somebody has information from the HOA complaint. That is an assumption. Who else had the vehicle identification number? She went quiet. I will look into it. I expected a call back. It never came. The following Tuesday, I left for my shift before sunrise. At 6:38, Maya called while I was inspecting a batch of aerospace fittings. Her voice was controlled, which scared me more than panic would have. Dad, the garage is open. I set down my micrometer. Do not go inside. Stay in the house. I already looked from the kitchen. She swallowed. The Mustang is gone. I called local police on the drive home. There was no broken glass, no damaged lock, and no obvious forced entry. A neighbor remembered seeing an enclosed vehicle transporter near my house shortly after 6, but assumed I had hired it. I handed the responding officer my clean Texas title and the photographs I had saved. He ran the vehicle identification number, stared at his screen, then asked me a question I was not prepared for. Mr. Cole, did you recently surrender ownership of this vehicle? Absolutely not. He turned the screen toward me. Somewhere in the system, my Mustang was already moving through an abandoned vehicle disposal process under paperwork claiming the owner could not be located. The officer could not tell me who had filed it, and that changed my priority immediately. Finding the Mustang mattered more than arguing about the HOA. I asked him to document my clean title, the missing vehicle, and the conflicting disposal record in the incident report. Then I called my insurer and flagged the car as missing without accepting the idea that it had somehow become abandoned. By noon, the vehicle identification number had drawn the attention of Detective Naomi Reyes, who worked property and vehicle fraud cases with Detective Aaron Pike. Reyes met me at the station and asked for something I had not considered. Who knew enough about this car to describe it accurately? I gave her the obvious names, including Marianne. Reyes wrote them down without reacting. Do not accuse anyone yet. Bad paperwork can be corrected. A person who thinks you are coming after them may start correcting it for you. I understood what she meant. That afternoon, I went to the Stonegate Ridge office expecting Marianne to resist me. Instead, she unlocked the records room. If somebody used this association to take your car, I want them found, she said. She showed me the violation log. My original driveway complaint was there. So was her notation closing it after receiving my documents. There was no board vote authorizing a tow and no payment to a towing company under my address. For the first time since the Mustang disappeared, my suspicion shifted away from her. Then Marianne pulled a vendor list from a cabinet and stopped talking. One company handled nuisance property referrals for several neighborhoods in the area, Voss Property Compliance. Voss? I asked. Her jaw tightened. My brother Caleb owns it. She insisted Caleb had no authority to remove vehicles from Stonegate Ridge without written approval. She called him with me sitting across the desk. Caleb sounded more offended than nervous. He said he had never touched my Mustang and told Marianne to check whether someone had used an old referral account. That possibility was believable enough to slow me down. I gave Reyes the company name instead of confronting Caleb myself. 2 days later, she called while I was at work. We located a record associated with your vehicle identification number, she said. Your Mustang entered a private holding facility after being transported from your neighborhood. I gripped the phone. Then we can get it back. Maybe, but there is a problem. The facility had already released it under a second authorization. The destination field had been changed from temporary storage to salvage processing. Before I could ask where, Reyes added one detail that erased the relief I had felt in Marianne's office. The electronic referral that started the entire chain had been submitted through credentials assigned to Voss Property Compliance, and attached to it was information copied almost word for word from the registration email I had sent only one person, Marianne. I did not call Marianne. That was the first useful decision I made after realizing how badly I had misread her. I sent Reyes every message Marianne and I had exchanged, then asked Maya to leave the house and spend the night with her mother until I understood who had accessed our property. Reyes agreed with the precaution, but warned me not to treat the copied email as proof Marianne had submitted anything. Her brother's company credentials could have been compromised, and several employees had access to its referral system. So I stopped chasing a name and started protecting the timeline. I wrote down when Marianne received my registration, when the orange sticker appeared, when the Mustang vanished, and when each disposal record changed. That sequence exposed something I had missed. The first filing did not merely call the Mustang abandoned. It claimed the owner's whereabouts were unknown. Yet whoever prepared it had copied information from an email that contained my full name, home address, telephone number, and current insurance information. The contradiction was not subtle. Someone had used proof that I was reachable to create paperwork saying I could not be reached. That evening, Marianne came to my house without warning. She stayed on the porch and kept her hands folded around a leather folder. "Ethan, this has gotten out of control," she said. She admitted Caleb's company had processed the referral, but insisted an employee had done it without understanding the dispute. Then she offered something I wanted badly enough to distrust myself. If I signed a release ending any claim against Stonegate Ridge and Voss property compliance, she said the Mustang could be returned within 48 hours and the HOA's insurer would cover any transport damage. "Where is it?" I asked. "I cannot disclose the facility until the release is signed." That answer stopped me. If she truly had authority to return my car, why was its location being used as leverage? I told her I needed time. She left the folder with me. Maya came home briefly the next morning to pick up clothes and found me reading the proposed settlement at the kitchen table. She scanned the first page, then looked at me. "If they can give Grandpa's car back, why will they not tell you where it is?" I called Reyes instead of Marianne. Reyes asked me to photograph every page and not sign anything. Less than an hour later, she called back. The Mustang had just been transferred again. Its new destination was Red River Auto Recyclers, and the release code authorized final disposal rather than storage. Reyes was already working to stop the process, but the change told us something worse than where the car was going. Whoever had offered to return my Mustang within 48 hours had apparently known, at that same moment, that it was being sent somewhere it might not survive 48 minutes. Reyes moved faster than I expected. By 10:20 that morning, she had spoken with Frank Dwyer, the manager at Red River Auto Recyclers, confirmed the Mustang was on his intake schedule, and told him the vehicle was connected to an active ownership and fraud investigation. Frank agreed to place an administrative hold on it while detectives secured the paperwork they needed. He photographed the Mustang exactly where it sat, recorded the odometer and vehicle identification number, and separated the keys and transfer documents from the normal processing file. When Reyes called me, I had to sit down. "It is intact," she said, "and it is not going through the crusher today." For the first time since Maya called me from the kitchen, I believed I might actually bring my father's car home. Better yet, the settlement Marianne had left on my table suddenly worked against her. I had the document offering to return a vehicle she claimed the HOA had no involvement in taking, and detectives now had a physical car whose transfer history could be compared against every authorization in the chain. I wanted to drive straight to Red River. Reyes stopped me. "Do not go there. Let us preserve this exactly as it is." This time, I listened. I called Maya instead. "They found it." She went silent for a second. "Is it okay?" "Frank says it is intact." "Then Grandpa gets to come home." I wanted to promise her that. I did not. At 11:07, Marianne called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was calm, almost careful. She said she had heard I was involving law enforcement and warned that escalating a civil disagreement could make recovering the Mustang more complicated. She asked me to reconsider the settlement before people made decisions they could not undo. I forwarded the recording to Reyes without responding. That felt like the first moment the balance had actually shifted. Marianne no longer controlled what I knew, where the car was, or whether I would sign her release. Then Frank called me at 7:18 the next morning. I knew something was wrong before he finished saying my name. "Mr. Cole, I need you to contact your detective. Is the Mustang still there?" "Yes, but 2 people just arrived with revised disposal paperwork. One of them says she represents your homeowners association." I was already reaching for Reyes's number. Frank lowered his voice. "It is Marianne Voss. Her brother is with her." I told him the vehicle was under a hold. "I know," he said. "That is why I have not touched it. But she brought documents claiming the ownership dispute was resolved after your detective called yesterday." My stomach tightened. "Resolved by who?" Frank paused. "According to what she handed me, by you." For 1 second, I almost drove straight to Red River. Then I remembered what Reyes had told me. Do not become the story. I called her first and repeated Frank's words exactly. She asked whether I had signed anything Marianne gave me. Nothing. Authorized anyone to sign for you. Never. Reyes told me to stay available and called Frank herself. 20 minutes later, she called back with the detail that changed everything. The revised packet did not contain my forged signature. It contained something more calculated, a declaration from Voss Property Compliance stating that direct contact with the registered owner had confirmed he was relinquishing any claim to the vehicle. No signature was required on that particular contractor form. Someone had converted a conversation that never happened into a business record. Suddenly, Marianne's settlement offer made sense differently. She had not simply been trying to end a dispute. She had been trying to obtain the release that would make the existing paperwork true after the fact. When I refused, the paper trail did not disappear, so somebody created a substitute. Reyes then asked me to listen to Marianne's voicemail from the previous morning again. One sentence landed differently now. She had warned me that people might make decisions they could not undo. She knew disposal was still possible, I said. Reyes did not answer that question directly. Instead, she told me Frank had preserved the revised packet and the yard surveillance system was recording Marianne and Caleb at the office counter. That should have reassured me. It did not. Marianne had already crossed from defending questionable paperwork into trying to overcome an investigative hold with a false statement attributed to me. The conflict was no longer about recovering property before bureaucracy swallowed it. The Mustang itself had become evidence of how that bureaucracy had been manipulated. My strategy changed with that realization. I stopped trying to negotiate its return. I told Reyes I wanted every decision about the car documented through investigators, even if that meant I could not take it home yet. Then my phone rang again. Caleb Voss. I nearly ignored it, but Reyes told me to answer normally and make no promises. Caleb sounded exhausted. Ethan, I told Marianne to leave the car alone. Then why are you at the yard? Because she said she could fix this. His voice dropped. She cannot. I heard Marianne in the background telling him to hang up. Caleb spoke faster. The original referral came through my company, but I did not submit it. She had access because she handled our HOA account. Then the line went dead. 30 seconds later, Frank called. Marianne had left his office and was walking toward the processing area with the revised authorization in her hand. Frank had refused to release the hold, but she was demanding to speak directly to the equipment supervisor. I grabbed my keys as Reyes said the words that made everything suddenly final. Ethan, do not confront her. We are heading to Red River now. I left the house, but I did not race across town. Reyes had been clear, and for once I understood that arriving angry would help Marianne more than it helped me. At the first red light, I forwarded Reyes the original photographs of the orange notice, Marianne's email closing the HOA violation, the unsigned settlement offer, and her voicemail. She already had copies, but I wanted the timeline in one place. The same woman who acknowledged my ownership had later offered to return the Mustang, then appeared at a salvage yard with paperwork claiming I had relinquished it. By the time I reached the industrial road leading toward Red River, Reyes called again. Frank is keeping the hold in place. Stay outside the processing area when you arrive. What about Caleb? He is still there. He told Frank he does not support destroying the vehicle. That mattered. Caleb had gone from the person I suspected most to the person refusing to follow his sister any farther. I pulled into Red River at 8:31. The Mustang sat beyond a chain-link gate near the processing lane, dusty but still whole. Seeing it intact nearly broke my discipline. I wanted the keys. I wanted to drive it through that gate and settle everything later. Instead, I walked into Frank's office and placed my clean title on his counter. Nobody moves that car on my word alone, I said. You follow the detective's hold. Frank nodded. Marianne stood 6 feet away with her leather folder open. She looked tired, not triumphant. Ethan, you are? Turning an administrative mistake into something much worse. Then stop trying to destroy the car. I am trying to complete a process that was already authorized. Caleb stared at her. Marianne, it was not authorized by him. She ignored him and showed Frank the revised contractor declaration. Frank pushed it back. I have an investigative hold. Marianne changed tactics immediately. No shouting. She argued that his hold was based on a telephone request, while her packet represented the current disposition record supplied through the contractor chain. Frank refused to release the Mustang, but he stepped away to call Reyes again before allowing anyone near the equipment. That temporary uncertainty was all Marianne needed. She walked outside and spoke quietly to the equipment supervisor, presenting the disposal packet as if the dispute had already been cleared. Caleb followed her, telling her to stop. I stayed beside the office door and called Reyes. "Where are you?" 2 minutes out. Then I heard a diesel engine start behind the fence. A forklift rolled toward the Mustang. Frank came running out of his office, waving both hands. Marianne stood beside the processing lane with the authorization raised in one hand. I looked at my phone. It was 8:34 in the morning. Reyes was still 2 minutes away, and the forks were already sliding beneath my father's car. The forklift lifted the Mustang before Frank reached the processing lane. "Stop the line," he shouted. The operator hesitated, but Marianne stepped forward and held up the disposal packet. "You have current authorization. Finish the job." I walked toward her without crossing the painted safety boundary. "Marianne, that declaration says I relinquished the car. Your dispute was resolved through the contractor." "I never spoke to the contractor." Caleb answered before she could. "He did not." Marianne turned on him. "Do not do this here." Caleb looked at the Mustang hanging above the concrete, then at his sister. "I told you yesterday. My company is not taking responsibility for that statement." For the first time, Marianne lost the protection of the person whose business credentials had carried the paperwork. Frank ordered the operator to hold position while he called Reyes again. Marianne did not retreat. She pointed to the packet and argued that Red River had accepted the vehicle under the same disposition chain before any detective called. She insisted a verbal investigative request did not erase the documents already in the yard system. Frank answered, "It does when ownership is disputed and the registered owner is standing 10 feet from me with a clean title." The forklift remained still. I could see the Boss 429 badge beneath a layer of road dust. I thought I had bought enough time. Then Marianne made her last move. She walked to the equipment supervisor and said the yard would be responsible for storage costs and contract losses if it refused a valid disposal authorization. The supervisor looked toward Frank, then toward the processing schedule clipped beside the controls. Frank was still on the telephone. The operator received a signal I could not see clearly. The forklift moved. "Frank," I shouted. He turned as the Mustang entered the processing position. The hydraulic system came alive. I stayed behind the safety line because running toward industrial equipment would not save the car. Marianne watched me instead of the machine. At 8:36, the press came down. Glass cracked. The roof folded. The car my father and I had spent years restoring disappeared into compressed steel. Marianne exhaled and said quietly, "Now there is nothing left to dispute." Frank lowered his telephone. "That is not what I told you." Caleb stepped away from his sister. I pulled out my phone and looked at the time. 8:36. Then I heard tires on the gravel entrance. 2 unmarked vehicles came through the gate. Detectives Reyes and Pike got out and walked directly toward us. Marianne immediately raised the disposal packet. Reyes did not take it. She looked first at the crushed Mustang, then at Frank, then at the surveillance camera above the processing lane. Frank said, "Everything is recorded." Caleb added, "And I will give you access to every Voss property compliance record you asked about." Marianne's face changed. Reyes finally looked at her and said, "Marianne Voss, put the folder on the ground and keep your hands where I can see them." Marianne set the folder down. Reyes spoke with Frank first, then Caleb, then me. Nobody needed to guess what had happened. The yard cameras had recorded Marianne presenting the disputed authorization, Frank refusing to release his hold, Caleb rejecting the statement attributed to his company, and Marianne pushing for disposal anyway. My clean title was still on Frank's counter. My registration email proved Marianne knew exactly how to reach me. Her settlement offer showed she knew I claimed the Mustang and had promised its return. The voicemail showed she knew irreversible action was still possible. The contractor declaration falsely said I had relinquished my claim. At 8:46, exactly 10 minutes after the press came down, Reyes placed Marianne under arrest while Pike secured the paperwork and Caleb agreed to preserve his company records for investigators. I watched the handcuffs close, but I did not feel like celebrating. The Mustang was still crushed. What happened afterward took months, not 10 minutes. Marianne was removed as Stonegate Ridge president under the association's procedures while the criminal case moved forward. Caleb cooperated, and the records supported the investigation into how my vehicle had been pushed through the abandoned property process. The HOA's insurer and the other responsible parties eventually resolved my property claim based on the Mustang's documented value, restoration records, photographs, and appraisal. My ownership was never legally surrendered, and the false disposal trail could not change that. The money covered the financial loss. It could not replace the years my father and I had put into that car. When investigators finally released what remained, Maya came with me to Red River. We searched through the parts Frank had kept separated from the scrap stream. Maya found a small machined shift knob my father had made on his lathe years earlier. I turned it over in my palm and recognized the tiny, uneven groove he had always meant to polish out. Months later, Maya helped me roll another Mustang shell into our garage. We were not pretending the old car had been replaced. We were starting something that belonged to us. I mounted my father's shift knob above the workbench where we could see it every time we picked up a tool. I still remember 2 times from that morning better than any others. At 8:36, Marianne Voss crushed a $250,000 Mustang after calling it abandoned. At 8:46, detectives arrested her because the evidence showed the owner had never abandoned anything. The paperwork lied. Ownership did not.